Awesome. This is one of the first series of a Healthy Root series. Today we're going to talk about Trust Your Gut. And we have here our Dr. Crystal is our naturopath. They've been working together for 2.5 years. So take it away, Crystal.
All right. So, yeah, thanks everyone for coming together and kind of learning a little bit deeper into how so many things can affect your health. As Mark mentioned, I've been in practice for a little over, a lot over 10 years, really having a special focus on gut health, inflammation, pelvic health in that realm. So hopefully today you'll get sort of a little taste as to how other aspects of your health are really kind of driving some of the inflammation that could be contributing to the pain that you're feeling with regards to arthritis. So really today's topic is, what is the gut microbiome and why you should really care. I would say, there are lots of different topics and terms that we've heard in mainstream media. And when we talk about the gut microbiome, what we really mean is the bacteria, either good or bad, viruses, fungus, all of that, all the living creatures that basically exist from the opening of your mouth all the way down to your anus. So everything in between that space constitutes as the gut microbiome. So Mark, I'll just get you to change the slide. And then we'll go one more over. Amazing. So, all the way back, we like to sort of like, there's been a subscription to the idea that all diseases begin in the gut. And you can see here on this slide that there are approximately 30 trillion human cells that exist in the body, but there are 39 trillion cells that are microbial. And so you're really more microbial than you are human. And it's really important to understand sort of that relationship and making sure that we feed the good bacteria and sort of starve out the bad. So on the next slide, Mark has a really good way to kind of explain a little bit of the gut microbiome and the good and the bad bacteria.
Yeah, so in this one, the easiest way to look at it, you think of a coral reef. You have the clownfish, you have the anemones, and the coral. There are they live upon each other. They need each other to support that coral reef. Same thing we have with the gut. You have those villi right here. I'm pointing out with the mouse, and they look like the anemones from the coral reef, and in between them live the bacteria. So that symbiosis between the two of them is very, very critical to our health.
Absolutely. So again, going with that theme of you're more microbial than you are human, we need to really make sure that we take care of our gut microbiome to make sure that we are having that healthy back and forth relationship. So on the next slide, we talk about here the different ways in which your gut microbiome essentially plays a role in other aspects of your health. So we're going to go through that step by step. And so on the next slide, we're going to focus on digestion. And so what I think a lot of people understand the concept of I eat something, my stomach will break it down, my intestines will essentially absorb it, and then I poop anything out that I don't need. However, especially in the large intestine, the creation of your B vitamins, vitamin K, all take place there. So if you don't have a healthy microbiome, your ability to create some of those necessary vitamins for life don't happen optimally. The other aspect as well is simply the absorption of nutrients. So going back to what Mark was mentioning, with those villi, they're kind of like this finger-like projection, and they are extended outwards like a finger-like projection, so that once your stomach breaks down the food and it passes through the intestines, those finger-like projections, or those sea anemones, they want to grab up to what's there to basically suck out any type of nutrition that the body may need in that period of time. And when there's inflammation, when there's dysbiosis in the gut microbiome, those finger-like projections become quite flat or swollen, and then they essentially become ineffective. Now, going to the mental health aspect, I I think more people are starting to understand this, but the gut bacteria manufactures up to 95% of serotonin, which is our happy, feel good hormone. And, you know, some gut bacteria has been shown to even produce GABA, and GABA is a neurotransmitter that helps you to feel calm and grounded. And so it's interesting because what science is trying to figure out now is, did the mental health dysfunction happen first, which then impacted the gut microbiome, or did the gut microbiome problem happen first, which then negatively impacted mental health? Right now, we don't know the true definitive answer, but what we do know is that that relationship exists. So, healthy gut, happy mind, essentially.
So one thing to add to this is awesome, Crystal, is especially with patients that are on narcotics to help their chronic pain, they quite often are constipated. And when you're constipated, you are disturbing the flora in that large intestine. So that's why people with painkillers, constipation, usually are depressed, anxious, because they don't produce that serotonin that what the large gut or the gut is supposed to produce. So yeah, so it's kind of the dilemma between I take painkillers to help my pain, but at the same time I'm going to feel depressed. So which one do you want to tackle first, right?
Yeah, and I'm actually really glad you brought that up because there have been studies to show that if you take one dose of Tylenol or Advil, you can actually negatively impact the microbial makeup in the colon for up to 24 hours. So, to my knowledge, anyways, I don't know if there's any been studies on the narcotics, but you can see how somebody who's constantly using pain medication are going to have disruptions to all other aspects of your health. So I'm really like glad you brought that up.
We lost that one. Here we go.
Awesome. So, with regards to hormones, this is actually really fascinating, and I deal with this a lot in my own practice. So, especially in the in the colon, there is, your liver helps to metabolize a lot of your hormones. So, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. But specifically with regards to estrogen, if there is an unhappy makeup of the bacteria in the colon, it can negatively impact the way how your body handles estrogen. And this can lead to conditions like endometriosis, PCOS, really painful periods. And for some people, especially going into menopause, it can make that transition a little bit more intense for them. There's also some data to show that there is some melatonin that is produced in the gut. And this is pretty fascinating because they've shown that people who've had the pineal gland, which is a gland that basically is in the brain, when they've had that removed, this person or the people are still able to have a regulation of their day night cycle. And so they thought that was very interesting. And they actually figured out that, oh, I guess the pineal gland doesn't produce 100% of the melatonin. The gut is able to produce some of that. And this is really important for sleep. Now, with regards to thyroid support, they've shown that people who have an unhealthy or an unbalanced gut microbiome, they can also have or be more prone to thyroid disorders. So specifically an underactive thyroid. And now specifically with regards to the immune system, there is sort of that component that, and we've known this actually for a whole lot longer than the mental health aspect, that 70 to 80% of your immune system resides in your gut. And this is incredibly important because, your immune system also helps to regulate your inflammatory cascade. So how inflamed are you as a person is connected to that immune system piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the leaky gut, I don't know, Mark, did you want to sort of speak to the inflammation and sort of that leaky gut picture?
Yeah, so same concept what we saw with those like the lining of the intestine. When you have that disruption between the bacteria and the health of the small intestines, and what happens is those gaps in the lining of the intestine gets bigger and bigger. That's when bacteria can seep in, the bad bacteria. So, and when they go in inside, that's when they create that inflammation process throughout the body. So there'll be a fight as the first line of defense is basically is the lining of the stomach. And when that gets disrupted, you feel generic inflammation throughout your body. And if it targets certain areas, we feel it as a disease, whether it's an arthritis or other illnesses. So yeah, it all starts, the immune system starts with the gut. And if that is not really working that well, that's when you're going to have toxins that leaks into the bloodstream and causes trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, oftentimes I know in practice, when I see patients with arthritis, I obviously don't have the scope of practice where I can inject different things to help the health of their joints.
Yeah,
But
no,
one
right.
of the first things that I do is help to or assess their overall gut health and sort of minimize that load, to allow that person to be less inflamed. And oftentimes people will comment on they feel, less tension in the joints and they feel better mobility. So it's all connected. Now, with regards to the VIP method, this is something that Mark and I it's been a labor of love. And Mark has basically been sort of spearheading this. And we tried to come up with a method to sort of address things in a very stepwise manner. And so one of the primary things that we sort of talk about in the clinic and with patients is the necessity for probiotics. Now, probiotics isn't just something that you take if you've had antibiotics. In fact, yes, if you've been exposed to antibiotics, all the more reason to be on probiotics. But probiotics can play a role in so many different ways, and different strains do different things. And so one of the reasons why we put somebody on a probiotic is to, number one, repopulate the large intestine, making sure that the right levels of those happy, good probiotics reside there. And most importantly as well, it's to boost the diversity. So oftentimes I'll actually have patients who will come into the office and they would have said, well, I've been on the same probiotic for the last year. And that's a big problem, because even though it's a good strain, it doesn't necessarily represent the diversity that naturally exists in the colon. And so that's really important, that you want to have a multi-strain probiotic and that you're changing the different strains that your body's exposed to as much as possible. And then finally, probiotics are helpful in that they can outcompete and defend. So if the bacteria, or if there are multiple strains of...
Can you mute your computer, Jen?
Pardon?
Just mute your audio. Okay, go ahead, Crystal.
So with regards to outcompeting and defend, so if you can imagine that there is a whole host of unfriendly bacteria hanging out in a specific spot. Well, if you can double, triple, and maybe even quadruple the amount of good bacteria that exists, they start to outcompete and defend the particular location, and then they can start to repopulate and create the right diversity that we're looking for in the colon.
Perfect. One of the analogies that I add to this is it's always a fight at every single day between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. It's more of a tug of war, who's going to win that day. And that's why the first thing that you eat in the morning is very critical. If you eat some junky stuff, high sugar content, preserved food, you're basically empowering the bad bacteria to take over. You feel sluggish all day, you feel bloating, cramping, and so forth, where it doesn't mean that you cannot have those junky food or drinks or sugary stuff, but at least you can empower the gut with all the good stuff first. Then later on the day, you might have a small amount of it, because that growth is really goes up and down every day. And the millions, if not billions of those bacteria grow every day up and down. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, you want your good bacteria to win every single day in the beginning of the day.
Yes, absolutely. So Mark, if you're able to switch over to the screen that says your next steps. So sometimes patients, so sometimes if a patient isn't unable to get a probiotic, or they're unable to use it for whatever reason, there are different things that you can do on a daily basis. Exactly what Mark was saying about sort of Like feed your gut with the things that are necessary to really help optimize your health. And there are two things that we can do to really sort of optimize that. And the first thing is feeding our diet, our gut microbiome, the resistant starches, and then also feeding it prebiotics. So if we go to the next slide, resistant starches are sort of like this new venue of nutrition that we are only now discovering in the last, I would say, maybe 5 years, and that might be a bit generous. But what they actually found out is that if you took rice and you cooked it as you normally would, and then you would put it in the fridge for 24 hours, take it out, reheat it, and, eat it as you normally would, it didn't spike people's insulin levels as high as it compared to people who ate the rice fresh. And this is important because when you have lots of multiple spikes in your insulin, there can be a lot of excess sugar hanging around in the blood. And this can oftentimes be the fuel for that bad bacteria to really sort of thrive. And so they are now starting to find out that things like oats, rice, pinto beans, black beans, green plantains, these are actual natural foods that are resistant in nature. So the really neat thing is, I don't typically tell my patients, please go eat, and also white potatoes, if you cook them and then store them for 24 hours and then heat them and use them again, it also turns it into a resistant starch. So in practice, I try to get patients to minimize the amount of white rice or white potatoes they would consume, because ultimately you're losing out on a lot of different other minerals and vitamins that exist there. But if somebody's going to do it, I'd like them to be really smart about doing it and basically turning that food into a resistant starch. So the key is that you want to cook it, let it cool, ideally in a fridge for 24 hours, and then you can reheat it as you normally would. With regards to prebiotic foods are essentially foods that have a type of fiber in it that your body can't naturally break down, but like the good bacteria, they love it and they use it as sort of like their juice to like really get going and thrive. And here's a list here. And so some of the common ones that are relatively easy to get a hold of are going to be garlic, onions, and leeks. So if you're cooking every day, add in some chopped onions, garlic. And if you're making a salad, don't be afraid to put in some raw onions. Experiment with cooked versus raw. Oats and barley are another option. And you might see an element here that you may not have come into contact with. So Jimica root is, I believe, from South America, or no, I think it's from Latin America. And it's a very interesting root. It has absolutely no flavor to it, but it's so crispy. And so if you mix it in with sliced apples and you put in some apple cider vinegar, you can make a really nice coleslaw. And it's a great way to feed that good bacteria. Flax seeds and seaweed. So use this list as a guide to maybe experiment with, maybe trying and challenge yourself with, incorporating one of these aspects and just kind of get your body acquainted with it.
So just to add on, just a lot of people confuse between the prebiotic and probiotic. The easiest way to think about it as an analogy is the prebiotic is your dirt and the probiotic is your seeds. So we are giving you bacteria, but we need that bacteria to have the right medium to grow, and that it would be the dirt. So when you combine both, and eventually you're gonna come to that dehydration, that's when you give yourself the water to nourish all that three combos together.
Yeah, and actually it's a beautiful segue into the next slide with regards to hydration. And I really like that analogy about the soil, the bacteria, which is the probiotics or the seed. And now we need to basically hydrate that. And so the average sort of person typically doesn't consume a lot of water. And it's because either they're just simply not taking in a lot of water in their daily diet, or they are actually consuming a lot of things that dehydrate their system. So if they have any coffee, if they have any black tea, anything with caffeine will dehydrate the system. And so what we try to challenge people to do is by looking, like, don't even count how much water you're taking in a day, just try and increase your water intake by 1 cup a day. And over the course of several weeks, you can then decide, okay, I think I'm ready to increase that again by maybe an additional cup. But the key here is that you do need to go slow, because if you're starting at a baseline of, let's say, 3 cups of water a day, and then you decide, you know what, I'm going to be a champion and I'm going to go do 7 cups a day, you're going to be in the bathroom a lot peeing, and you're not going to really enjoy our sort of our advice for you. So it really is key for you to take it slow, listen to your body, and gently over time increase that by 1 cup every few weeks.
I love that concept because most people kind of get stuck in how many cups should I drink per day. There's a lot of generic guidelines to say drink 8 cups per day, but really, even myself in the winter time, there's no way I can drink 8 cups per day. So one of the markers that you could do is if you can pee clear, means you drank enough fluid. The second aspect that I want everyone to remember, that when you drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or a pop, do not count those as water, because you're gonna literally pee that, if not more. So that is not part of your equation. Only clear water with no additives of sugar or caffeine, that considered as water.
Absolutely. And so, I have patients so it's interesting because I practice a lot of Chinese medicine in my own practice. And in Chinese medicine, we see coffee and black tea, so anything with caffeine and also alcohol, as we call it, toxic heat. And so what we get people to do is, if they can't part with their coffee or tea, and truthfully, like, I am a naturopathic doctor, I love a cup of, tea or coffee in a day. Follow it up with a cup of water right off the bat, and just know, if you do that, well, now you're net neutral. And sort of just kind of remind yourself that every time you have a cup of coffee or cup of tea, let's follow that up with a cup of water as well. But great tip. So yeah, your speed of healing really is ultimately connected to the health of your gut. And if you really want to get the results that you're hoping to see, you really need to take charge and take responsibility for how you feed your gut and how you treat your own intestinal health. Obviously, when you go see Dr. Mark, he can inject you with all the great, beautiful things on the planet, and he can recommend all the most amazing things ever that will get you what you need. But it's about how long will those benefits last for? And that's where you come in, by really taking care of all aspects of your health to ensure that the results last for quite a long period of time.
Totally. So this is one of the amazing aspects I'd like to hit home with this lecture, or with any future webinars we're going to be in together, is if we want to take a journey toward a better health, it cannot be done only from one side. Whether a naturopath or myself or another doc cannot do it from one side. The patient has to be involved to do their part. Actually, what we do, let's say I do the PRP injection, well, that's a 1 or 3 sessions, but what you do at home is much more important, if not as good as what we do at the clinic. So you do your part, I do my part, we meet halfway through. It's really cannot depend on one aspect or the other.
Absolutely. And so actually on the next slide here, you'll see, specifically with regards to arthritis and sort of the changes to our joints, that they have 3 major components. And so you've got your physical stress. So that's if somebody had injuries, overuse, poor posture, and quite oftentimes actually living a sedentary lifestyle is also going to put a lot of undue stress onto the joints. That's going to have a negative impact on, or that's going to have an impact on, how your joints respond to the environment. And then you've got your chemical stresses. So poor diet, smoking, drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, and chemical usage. And when we say chemical usage, we're talking about, what are the chemicals that you use at home to do your cleaning? What are the chemicals that you put on your face? So makeup, skin lotion, skincare. What are the chemicals you put in your hair when you color your hair? All of these things can put a burden on your body. And if you can be really good about maybe minimizing one or two of these things, you can actually see some pretty big drastic impacts. With regards to emotional stress, we talk about poor sleep, and we will be talking about poor sleep, the relationships that you have. And actually, Mark, if you want to speak to the social media and the isolation piece, because I think you say it really well.
Yeah, so that goes, we're gonna go dive deep into it when we talk about this part, but in general, if we have a higher cortisol level, everything shuts down because the body is in a flight and fight mode, and it's not the time to heal. So you think of yourself, if you like a bear is chasing you, you're scared. That's not the time to heal a joint. That's not the time to digest food. That's not the time to regulate sleep, because you're always on edge. And unfortunately, social media, bad news, always trigger that flight and fight mode and trigger that cortisol level spike. Because either you're, because of the bad news itself, or you're trying to compare yourself with others, and kind of leave you isolated. And the isolation part is because you feel that you don't belong to this society, or you don't belong even within your own family. And the whole idea is you need to disconnect from those. They are not helping you in any way, or in any shape or way. So minimize it as possible. I know it can be an addiction, but try to minimize it as much as possible, so you can start a new healthy style.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of like, Mark brings up a really good point that it can be addictive, and sort of, making the small changes about maybe changing the people who you follow on social media, so that I always talk about, if it doesn't leave you feeling empowered or feeling a sense of joy, it's not really speaking to your higher purpose of why you're here. And so community is so important for that. And how you choose who comes in and out of that community is also incredibly important. And so here we've collected some additional resources if you're really interested in sort of taking a deeper dive, because really the point of tonight is to just give you a little taste, a little flavor, and kind of sort of like plant the seed to help you start thinking a little bit deeper about your overall health. And specifically with the gut microbiome, I've given you some podcasts here. So the first one is by Chris Kresser. He's actually a TCM, a Chinese medicine doctor, but he really takes a super deep dive. Any episode that this person posts, it's highly, highly researched. And he basically provides all of the additional research at the end. And then The Natural State with Dr. Anthony Gustin. So he's a chiropractor from the States. He will sort of have conversations with regards to the nuances with regards to different diets that people will go through and how that can impact the gut microbiome. The other, in terms of books, the Microbiome Breakthrough by Raphael Kelman, that's sort of like, I wouldn't say the Bible, but a lot of people are quite familiar with his work with regards to the gut microbiome. I think he really made it public for mainstream. And then if you just want a quick 10, 15-minute video to sort of really whet your curiosity and whet your palate for just really understanding the marvel of the gut microbiome, there's a YouTube video. And if you click on the link, it'll lead you right there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Crystal. And now this is going to open the Q&A session. So for anyone who has questions, you can type them or you can speak them out. Any questions, Jen?
No, I'm good.
Do you have a question about your supplement and how you take them? And
Well, I've been taking them the way, like, as best I can in terms of like making sure to take them with food and take them when I'm supposed to, and all of the things. But the drink one still is not agreeing with me. Like,
I
even
know.
today, it's not. I am getting sick. Like, it's coming back out, and that is not
okay,
probably not helping. So
Crystal, she's talking about the GI Revive. Do you have any other suggestion? I talked to Jen earlier today and said maybe break it into two halves, half in the morning, half at night. But when she tries to take the full thing, she feels nauseated and sometimes throwing up from it. So do you have any
Right.
other tricks how she can
Yeah, so I would
Take it.
probably say just definitely, I'm curious, are you also taking the gentian as well, the bitter liquid?
Yep, I take
Okay.
that like before dinner. But the one in the morning, like on an empty stomach, it is not staying in. Like some days I can keep it down, and generally, if I start to feel nauseous, like I'll just stop. I'll be like, okay, I've got half of it
Yeah.
in. Let's try to keep that in,
Yeah.
rather than having
Throwing
none.
up a whole
So
bunch. Yeah.
right, and so and then I hope at that point that if I stop drinking it, I'm not gonna throw up.
Yeah.
And I'll
So I
keep as
think
much
what,
of it in.
yeah, I think what might be helpful is to start with just half the dose in the morning time. And how much
Okay.
water are you putting in the cup when you use it?
Well, I was using like a measuring cup for like a cup.
Yep. Okay. So you might want to just do, if you're doing half a dose of the powder, use only half a cup of water. So it's
Okay.
quicker for you to shoot down,
Right.
and do that for about 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then you can start to experiment to see, okay, can you handle maybe half a dose twice a day and breaking
Okay.
it up that way?
And when would be the best time to like if I'm gonna be drinking the other half, when should I try to incorporate that? Just
So
because
I
I mean,
For timing,
like,
yeah, I totally get
yeah.
it. Yeah, so
Oh,
ideally you want to take it before 2 p.m. in the day. So, even if you space it out, let's say you do the first half a dose first thing in the morning, you could in theory take the other dose, at like an hour or two later if it's within your capacities to do so. But if you're living like quite a busy lifestyle and it's just not feasible for you, then, I would much rather focus, or I would prefer in your case to just focus on getting the half a dose, and maybe down the road you can have a conversation with Mark with regards to maybe trying a full dose. But I think doing it a full dose right now is just not working for you. So just cut it down by half.
okay,
And
perfect.
so the other thing, Crystal, she can take the half every day and just take a longer duration rather than try to finish it in
Exactly.
6 months. It might
Exactly.
be within 3 months or so, right? So yeah,
100%.
don't dwell about it, Jen. Do whatever you can. If you took the half with the cup of water and that makes you feel okay, then skip the other one. Just do it once a day till you finish the bottle.
Okay,
Exactly.
perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming in today. That was awesome information. And we'll catch up in 2 more weeks.